you didn't want to do anything with the jewelry business, but yet in 2005, both of you decided that it sparked the fire within. What happened there?
Aditi's always loved jewelry. I grew up watching my dad in wholesale gemstones. And I always thought it was a sleepy, antiquated business, so never really wanted to get in. Kind of crazy story. Ratan Tata came to speak to campus for us, and I introduced myself and I said, I'm such a big fan. And we had a 3-hour conversation, and he's like, why don't you visit Tanishq?
What made you focus on the gemstone side of the story?
I think it really making our customer the true north. So when we introduced the good, better, best heirloom, no one else had done that before.
You believe that this is the Kodak moment for the diamond industry. Why do you say that?
Federal Trade Commission in the US said a lab-grown diamond is a diamond. They're chemically, physically, optically identical.
Okay.
You can get a lab-grown diamond for 90 to 95% cheaper.
What's the India plan?
We've started 6 months ago with an alpha launch. We've way surpassed our expectations so far. India is roughly 22% of the world's jewelry market. I think by 2030, I think we get past 1,000 crores.
Hello and welcome to the Young Turks Reloaded podcast. I'm Shereen Bhan. Entrepreneurship is about creative destruction. It's about creating new categories, but it's also about reinventing existing categories. My guests today are attempting to do that in the gems and jewelry business. They started Angara, which quite literally means the fire within, a company started in 2005 to cater to the online jewelry market in the US. Today, they've got revenue of over $100 million and the aspiration of touching $1 billion by 2030. They've just launched in India and they're hoping to make India a big part of their global growth plan. To talk to us about bringing color back into the jewelry business, as well as the disruption that we are seeing in the gems and jewelry business because of the growth and the rapid rise of lab-grown diamonds, Ankur and Aditi Daga join me on the podcast today. Ankur and Aditi, many thanks for joining us here on the Young Turks podcast. It's great to have you join us on the program. But, I want to start with the two of you. Both of your families have been in the gems and jewelry business for centuries. In your case, centuries. In your case, how long?
Decades.
Decades, okay. And you didn't want to do anything with the jewelry business, but yet in 2005, both of you decided that it sparked the fire within. What happened there?
Yeah, so I think both of our stories are slightly different there. Aditi's always loved jewelry. I grew up watching my dad in wholesale gemstones. And I always thought it was a sleepy, antiquated business, so never really wanted to get in. But life, of course, comes full circle. So my first brush with jewelry was in college. Kind of crazy story. Ratan Tata came to speak to campus for us.
Right.
And
this is Wharton.
This is at Wharton,
Yeah.
correct. And then he just mentioned that he's going on a train to New York. So I went to the train station, tried to catch him there. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm such a big fan, but I just want to let you know that when I go from Delhi to Jaipur, I'm behind a Tata truck.
Huh.
And the exhaust is coming straight into our car and I fall sick. And so if you can fix that, that would be great. And we had a couple of minutes of conversation. He said, give me your details.
Oh.
And so when he got back to India, he then wrote me a letter saying, next time you come to Bombay, I would love to meet you there, which is insane. So go to Bombay, and we had a 3-hour conversation. And he's like, why don't you visit Tanishq? Tell me what you think. And that was my first brush with jewelry retail. And I said, wow, this is amazing. This is organized retail. I'm seeing what they're trying to do. Thereafter, I happened to join McKinsey after undergrad. And fortuitously, my first project my longest project was with McKinsey, with Tanishq in India. And so I said, I clearly see this way to organize jewelry retail, and that's the future for me. So life ends up coming full circle.
So Tanishq inspired the Angara story.
That's right.
What was the reaction of the families when you decided that, you're going to give up consulting and go back to the family business, so to speak?
I mean, it was risky, but I mean, luckily they were always very encouraging and very supportive. But I think the idea of selling jewelry online was still like did not sit well. But I don't think they could understand that someone could do that.
Huh.
And I think in 2005, it's like, well, we sell things for like $50,000. Is someone really going to buy that online? So I think initially when we started too, we started with a much higher ticket price, and kind of to understand the customer, we did have to pivot a lot and get it down to the price that the customers were comfortable buying at, and then build it up again. I think that was key.
My dad's like, went to Wharton, McKinsey, Harvard, and you want to come back into the jewelry business. It was just like, what are you smoking? It was kind of his. I said, Dad, I think we can change the industry.
Did you present him the business plan first?
Yeah, he thought it was bonkers. He's
Really?
like, you're never going to achieve that top line. And he was right. We didn't in the time frame that was on that business plan. So everything he said has been right. It just took us longer. But we'll get there.
And what did you think when he decided that this was what he wanted to do?
The next time he says, I'm never doing something, I'm going to bet against it, because he said, I'm never coming into the jewelry industry before. So yeah, I learned my lesson.
And you never considered getting into the jewelry business either.
I didn't initially, but I don't know. I always had a love for jewelry, and I don't know when I fell in love with it first. Whether it's, going as a child to the temples and you see the deities adorned, and it's glowing, everything's glowing, and it looks so beautiful, and kind of I fell in love without knowing, or like seeing my mom kind of decked up in the holidays, and I'm one of 4 sisters, so like always waiting for us, that if there's an occasion, we're going to take something from her jewelry box and wear it, and hearing, seeing my father design so passionately, or my grandfather hearing his stories for their legacy, seeing him sit with the karigars and really kind of making sure that the jewelry is perfect for that custom piece, nahi usko wapas todo, make it again because the customer wants it this way, it doesn't sit properly, and that attention to detail,
old school.
it was in my head, I guess at some point. And then his charming brothers, at the front and sales, but they weren't selling, they were building lifelong relationships, it felt like. And then it's like it felt like this treasure trove, and like, how do we scale this? Somewhere at the back of my mind, it was there. And then kind of when we met fortuitously and wanted to start something together, we kind of put all those pieces together.
And the two of you actually met and got married when you were 22, and that was an arranged thing.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
So you didn't know each other at all.
No, not at
previously.
all. Nope.
So what was that? What was that like when you first met Aditi?
Yeah, so we were introduced, as you mentioned, and it took me 2 months to figure out, can someone be so perfect? So I was like, "Kuch to gadbad hai." And what you see is what you get. But I think what I ended up doing is I used all my karma points from my previous lives, went all in, and luckily she said yes, and I'm super thankful for that.
And so you have grown together. I mean, 22 and then setting up a company together and watching it grow into $100 million enterprise today with the aspiration of $1 billion in sales by 2030. You kind of built this together. What's that been like?
I mean, it's been an amazing journey. Like you said, we grew up together. So we went to grad school together. Then we started this together. All those points of disappointment and, shared experiences. We love doing things together, but we also find time to pursue our passions independently. And I think that's the key, that we grow independently and together.
I'll get to the passions in just a second, but let's talk about starting up. So in a way, the gems and jewelry business has been in your blood, but actually starting up, that experience, and I want to go back to 2005, the decision to bootstrap, not get any venture money on board, that's because you saw a friend of yours go through a bad experience, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. One of my best friends raised a lot of industry capital or venture capital at that time. And everything for him went right for the first 4 years. But the markets in 08, 09 turned and everything changed. All of a sudden, he was able to sell the company. The board took him out of that position. And I never wanted to go through that. Ours is a 50-year journey. It's not like a 5 years, let's build it, let's sell it type of play. And so venture capital, 5 to 10 years fund cycles versus what we were trying to do was completely different. And honestly, I would have been fired in the first 2 years if there was a VC funding us. I did everything wrong. So graduated in 05. We raised some amount of industry capital at the onset. We hired a lot of very good people without product market fit. So we had huge burn, but very little in terms of sales. we were trying to do everything. We were trying to do diamonds, color stones, all sorts of product categories, which was trying to attack too much with limited amounts of capital. And the people that we hired, even though they were amazing, a lot of ex-De Beers, LVMH, very senior talent, but we were a startup with no revenue. So it was not the right person at the right time. And so I went through 90% of our capital very quickly. We were 4 months away from running out of cash. And we would have gone under in that case. Luckily, a few things happened. One is we shifted all of our operations from New York to India. And our operating cost structure went down by 90%. We focused all in on colored gemstones. And all of a sudden, things started taking off. And our team there and in India, we were all in. We were 24/7. We lived it. This was our life. And the only thing that we're thinking about is how do we make the company survive? And that focus that resulted from that, even till today, we're trying to be as focused as possible. But, we have PTSD from that time, right? So that's why no further capital raises. We will grow it on our own. We will reinvest capital. And we'll get to $1 billion without any external funding.
I'll talk about the PTSD in just a second, but many of the decisions that you were forced to take, shifting operations to India or doubling down on the colored gemstone side of the business, were perhaps not conscious decisions as much as you were forced to take them because of your circumstances. As you look back today, I mean, that was probably the biggest bet that you made, which has taken the company from where it was, which was on the brink of not being able to make it to where it is today. So as you look back, what made you focus on the gemstone side of the story?
So I think it really making our customer the true north. I think that was the key. Customers would call us and say, we love the design, but can you give us a bigger carat weight, or can you give us a higher quality? And we said, there's something to this when enough customers started calling in. So when we introduced the good, better, best heirloom, no one else had done that before. So we pioneered in introducing different qualities, different sizes, different metals all together. And so no matter who the customer was, you could get exactly what you wanted, provided you liked that design sensibility. And that's really helped us take off.
I'll talk about personalization as well, but going back to that difficult period, the first 5 years of the business where, you were still figuring things out. Selling jewelry online to start with is a difficult proposition because trust has been so crucial as part of this transaction. And it's taken a while, even in India. I mean, in India, it's taken a long time for people to get used to the idea of e-commerce to start with. But what was that like? I mean, when you put the business plan together, how concerned were you about the acceptability of this?
Yes. So the numbers on the business plan or in the Excel sheet were actually super exciting. But in reality, so what was happening is 2% of jewelry in the US was sold online back in 2005, but it was growing at 50% per year. So we're like, oh, this is amazing. We always wanted to be a color stone oriented company. And kind of the backstory there is that these families been in the business for 300 years. And 300 years ago, it was all about color.
Right.
So for hundreds of years, color was the majority of studded jewelry. And we said, can we bring that back? And my parents were in wholesale gemstones also. So I kind of saw it happening. And I was like, there's an opportunity here.
Why do you think we lost on the color side of the story?
So De Beers and A Diamond is Forever was the single most brilliant marketing campaign of all time. So in 1947, they launched 75 years ago, roughly, with the idea of A Diamond is Forever, with a 2-month salary for an engagement ring. That's how you show your love. This idea, the singular idea of perfection. So a D flawless, which is colorless and flawless, is what we should all aspire to. And that's the ultimate idea of success. And all of a sudden, color stones went from a majority of the industry to 10%. And in that process, can we revive that? Can we bring the industry back to that? It was much easier said than done.
Right.
And so if e-commerce is 2%, if color stones are 10%, so that's 0.2% of the market.
Yeah.
That's what we were dealing with. And we had to create the entire category, which was a gargantuan task. And it took us a lot of time and effort and luck to get
well,
out of
luck is crucial, but what were the key ingredients, the key levers that you decided to play on to take on the De Beers of the world and, in a sense, reclaim share?
think there was a lot of education involved, as Ankur said, and no one knew about the different qualities of gemstones that were available. So, for example, in India, when you say opal, people could be selling Ethiopian opal, which has a beautiful color play to begin with, but as you begin to wash your hands, it loses it over time. Versus a higher quality Australian opal, which is the one that should be sold because that's what lasts for a lifetime, or as long as it can. And I feel like those things are critical, educating the customer about the different qualities. And, I have a background in education. So it's really about scaffolding. On every page, it's like, okay, what information does the customer need? What's a rollover telling them that this quality exists in this space? What does good mean? What does better mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was key. Education was really key. And in the e-commerce space, reviews are pivotal.
Yes.
So really building that trust over time, it took a lot of time and effort, to do that for the customer.
So when do you believe you felt that you had been able to survive this storm, and then you could put together a plan to thrive and scale the business?
Yeah, so 2010 was a turning point. We were cash flow positive in 2010, and that's when we also jumped back into color stones. And because the business started taking off, we said, you know what? We have something here. And what was fascinating for us is the awareness initially was so low. So even if you go to Tiffany in Fifth Avenue, right, the largest retail store in the US, you would only see 3 to 5 sapphire rings. So, and citrine, peridot, amethyst, those were not even there. So we had to first show customers that, hey, this is the entire world
This
of
exists.
gemstone
Yeah.
jewelry. And back then, Google's and search engines in general were the primary way to get traffic. So somebody had to actually type in sapphire engagement ring for us to show up. So building awareness, I think, was step one. But what was interesting is we were the only ones in that market. So because there was no competition, the cost per clicks were very low. And the economics started working, and we started growing very quickly as a result of that, thankfully.
So that was 2010, which was a key inflection point.
Yep.
Let's talk about 2025. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're seeing in the jewelry market worldwide today is this big takeoff as far as lab-grown diamonds are concerned.
Yeah.
And now, people are asking the question on what actually happens to a company like De Beers. In fact, you believe that this is the Kodak moment for the diamond industry. Why do you say that?
So I'll give you some data that we're seeing live. So De Beers is interesting because it was 6.6 billion in revenue in 2022. It halved. 2024 was 3.3 billion. In a high fixed cost business, it's just very difficult to survive in that. But the reason that happened is in 2018, the FTC, so Federal Trade Commission in the US, said a lab-grown diamond is a diamond. They're chemically, physically, optically identical.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, it legitimized the entire industry for everyone. And now, you fast forward 7 years, you can get a lab-grown diamond for 90 to 95% cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's chemically, physically, optically identical. So the whole use case that for natural
So
diamonds...
if it's identical, then what's the difference then? If
Yeah.
it's certified as being identical.
Yeah, so one comes out of the earth,
Yeah.
one is grown in a
Yeah.
lab. So the interesting thing is, so historically, diamonds, the way De Beers created that whole industry, there were two primary reasons you would buy diamonds. So one is financial flex. If you're wearing a 1 carat, 2 carat, 3 carat solitaire, it says something about your socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
Right? The other is it's an inflation hedge. It outperforms inflation by 2 to 3% per annum. So it's a great investment while you get to wear it. Now with lab grown, the financial flex goes away because it's 90 to 95% cheaper, and no one can tell if you're wearing natural or lab.
Right.
And the investment case goes away because diamonds have gone down in price anywhere from 40 to 45% in the last 3 years.
So it's not a safe haven bet.
No longer.
No
It
longer.
used to be historically.
Yeah.
Last 10 years, that's not the case. Almost every other asset class has outperformed. Sensex obviously has. Gold has performed better than that. Gemstones have performed better than that. So because both of the primary use cases are gone, it's going to be very difficult for natural diamonds. You'll have like a Tiffany, Graf, Harry Winston, and 20% of the market will survive, but everything else, in our opinion, is going to be left.
So you believe this is irreversible, the change that we're seeing today?
It's a better product.
It's a better product. It's better for the environment as well. And you're saying it's cheaper to... Is it also a generational thing? Do you believe the Gen Z customer is today more open to the idea of a lab-grown diamond as opposed to, our parents' generation and even the millennials?
Absolutely. They're open to alternative center stones. So in the US, we already saw that lab-grown center stones for engagement rings were 2% of the market. They're now over 55%.
Over 55%.
Over 55% for engagement rings. And in India, we're already seeing that 80% of our customers are choosing lab-grown diamonds over natural diamonds.
And that's a price thing, I would imagine.
It's a price thing. They have the choice, but they didn't have the choice before. So I think it's price. I think it could be, for some people, sustainability. Whatever the reason is, the myriad of reasons, I think that there's a clear winner.
And importantly for us, we're agnostic whether people buy
Yeah.
lab or natural. We educate on both. We say one is not an investment clearly, the other will hold value better than lab will. And we do the same for color gemstones as well, where you say these are the pros and cons. Our objective is to educate, as Aditi was talking about. And then it's up to the customer. But the customer is clearly choosing. We could see it in the data in the US. And the takeoff for lab in India is even faster than in the US. So yeah, as you said, it's irreversible. It's not coming back.
It's not coming back. But, you can afford to be agnostic because it's still, 20% of your business is between lab grown as well as natural diamonds at this point in time. And the bread and butter continues to be gemstones for you. But do you see this changing? Do you see yourself shifting more towards lab grown if you believe that that's going to be the market that's seeing this kind of explosive growth?
Yeah, so the lab grown, so the color stone market in India is very interesting. So 2% of India's market is color gemstone based. That's it. But
and given the history of India,
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the case? Again, a lack of choice, especially on the organized side?
So it's choice and it's education both. And this idea of Indians look at jewelry as an investment. That's the primary use case, right? And in that, there was never this idea that gemstones would hold value, whereas diamonds were perceived to hold value. So I think that's fundamental to it. 90% of the market is gold jewelry, 10% is diamond studded, and then 2% is. But what's really interesting is if you look at Sotheby's, Christie's, Phillips auctions world over, color stones are way outperforming. They're 2 to 3 times the high estimates for all of the auctions, right? So as an asset class, they're starting to take off. And I think as soon as people start realizing that, and diamonds, so if you look at kind of appreciation, diamonds have lost value over the last 10 years. Sensex has gone up by 11%, gold by 14%, gemstones anywhere from 15 to 21% per annum. As soon as people start understanding that, I think the market starts to turn. There's already an affinity. So we were surprised at how savvy the Indian customer already is. We're selling aquamarine, citrine, sapphire, emerald, ruby, with a lot less need for education than we had in the US.
Okay.
So like you were saying, the market already knows. The Maharaja Patiala wore color, the Nizam wore color.
Yeah.
It's been a part of our culture for centuries. But there is a slight need for re-education now, which is part of our objective.
And just to add to that, I think it's really interesting how in colored gemstones, it's the opposite of diamonds, where 80% in India want natural color. And I think this is natural affinity, the astrologer told him to wear this. And, things like that, and color is such a big part of our DNA,
Yes.
where, the energy that comes from natural gemstones is very attached to the Indian DNA as well.
So you've got lab-grown diamonds taking off, but you've also got a preference as far as natural gemstones, colored
Absolutely.
gemstones are concerned. So both running on parallel tracks. But let's talk about India, because it's taken you a while to get here, to launch operations here. You finally decided to launch in India. What's the India plan?
So we've started 6 months ago with an alpha launch. We've way surpassed our expectations so far. So we've done 10 crores in revenue thus far with minimal marketing. We're already profitable in India. India is roughly 22% of the world's jewelry market. I think by let's say 2030, I think we get past 1,000 crores. And I think it grows from there. So we're super excited about the market. It's ripe for color right now. Just some rough numbers just to kind of show India versus the world. 400 billion is the overall market size for jewelry.
Right.
India's 85 billion, as is the US. What's insane about that is the US GDP is $30 trillion.
Yes.
India's GDP is 4.3 trillion.
Yeah.
Right? It's 7 times more valuable here. 2% of India's GDP is jewelry, and is growing at 10 to 15% a year. This is, in my opinion, the most exciting gemstone or jewelry market in the world, and it will be for the decades to come. So we're super bullish. We're excited.
So clearly the headroom for growth is what you're betting on as far as India is concerned. But what have been some of the initial learnings? You said you launched in India 6 months ago. What have been some of the initial learnings of having launched in India?
That the e-commerce customer is very savvy in India,
Yeah.
and they're very mature. So our average order value is over 50,000 rupees, which is really high for jewelry online. Like Ankur mentioned, that the Indian customer is very sophisticated in terms of knowing about color. There's been less education. They've leaned towards blue stones a lot, which is surprising to me. That has been a key learning. And then the lab versus natural in diamonds, that 80% want lab, and on the color side, like I mentioned, 80% want natural color. I think those have been the key learnings.
We've had a couple of startups here in India do online jewelry, and of course, you talked about Tanishq. We had Carrot Lane, and I believe you have a personal link to Mithun Sucheti at Carrot Lane, and he managed to sell that business.
Brilliant job.
To Titan. How do you see the evolution of the e-commerce market, and specifically the jewelry market? What surprised you about the way that it's going in India?
I think so. What's idiosyncratic about India versus the US? I think India will go very much the way of the US. This is still today a offline market. So even the e-commerce players that you're talking about, most of their sales happen offline. I think that will start to change. I think people are much more comfortable. We're talking about Zepto, for example. They're just much more comfortable ordering online, buying online.
Yeah, difference between a coffee and a 50,000
That's
piece
right.
of jewelry.
That's right. And in that 50,000 rupee piece, I think, so it's interesting. Three fundamental differences are happening for us in India versus the rest of the world. One is 80% of the customers that have called in are saying, "Aapka store kahan par hai?" Right? And that doesn't happen anywhere else.
Aapka store kahan pe hoga?
Yes. Or kahan par hai? Right? So they're already thinking we have offline retail.
But are you going to do offline retail?
So our first store worldwide will be in Jaipur.
In Jaipur?
Yeah.
That's home.
That's
quite literally
Yes.
for you.
That's great for both of us.
So we're super excited about that. But we're going we're completely customer led in terms of what's needed. Our store experience, I think, will be fundamentally different than what you see here at a Tanishq or Carrot Lane or Bluestone or so. There'll be much more experience centers. Everything we do is bespoke. So if you order right now, the piece will be built after you order.
Okay. Every single piece is done that way.
Every piece is bespoke. And let's say you're a ring size 5. It will be made in that. So kind of the manufacturing process for us, we're completely vertically integrated end to end.
Right.
Except for mining, we kind of do everything else.
Yeah.
So we cut and polish gemstones, we cast jewelry, we manufacture jewelry, we retail over the web. So that piece, kind of the life cycle of that piece is really interesting. So if you order now, let's say it's a ring size 5, it's a 3-stone sapphire ring. It will be cast, it will take 8 hours to cast it.
Okay.
Then we'll hand pick the diamonds and color stones. We'll set that. We will then polish, rhodium, QC thoroughly, and then ship out. So by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, it's already on a flight somewhere to you. But that whole 6-month process from 300 years ago, we've compressed down to 24 hours.
How do you do that? How do you compress what took 6 months to 24 hours?
We had to vertically integrate. So we started with manufacturing jewelry. Then we went into product development and design. Then we started cutting and polishing gemstones. And so we'll buy rough all over the world. We'll go to Western Australia for opal. We'll go to Thailand for ruby and sapphire. A lot of gemstones are cut and polished in Jaipur. So we have that as well. And so we'll source...
manufacturing is all here?
So manufacturing, we have a center in Thailand,
Okay.
a center in Los Angeles, and a center in Jaipur. And so we have now offices all over the world. We have supply coming from all over the world. Everything is centralized. Depending on where the customer is, we will make everything in-house. But then it gives us the ability to really cater to whatever the customer wants, which is back to our original mission. It took us a lot of time and effort to do it. But now we feel like the experience is what it should have been from the get-go, which is you could have whatever you want. And I'll give you kind of an example of ring size.
Yeah.
So most jewelers across the world will stock in a ring size 6.5. And let's say if you're a ring size 5, they will
Resize
modify
it.
and resize. Now the problem is structural integrity is harmed and the shape of the ring is harmed. But it's convenient because they have inventory. Right? And they want to sell that inventory.
Yeah.
For us, we're making it from scratch, so we'll do it right the first time. We have 40 different gemstones, multiple qualities, shapes, sizes, budgets. To do all of that in one physical store is very hard. But what our customer is looking for is, are you guys legit? Do you actually exist? If a problem happens with the product, can I come in and return it? And that's where I think the experience center concept for us will be key. this is our quality. You compare our quality to the best in the world, a Tiffany or Harry Winston or so forth, and we'll be up there. These are the natural gemstones. We'll have an example of a ruby, sapphire, tanzanite, so forth, and all of the various qualities we offer. And we'll have an example of lab also. And then you tell us what you're envisioning, what the design is, and we'll craft it and ship it to you, which is a fundamentally different model than anything else.
So it's already personalized, but are we now heading into an era of even more personalization or hyper-personalization, if I can use that term, especially with the AI tools that are now available? I mean, how much of that is already being incorporated into plans for you?
Yeah, so it's a fundamental part of what we're trying to do. So the original mission is to bring the industry back to its roots. AI will make that possible. So we're developing something as a chatbot right now where it's like you're sitting in front of your jeweler.
Yeah.
And you would say, hey, I'm dreaming of a pendant that's a 5-carat sapphire pendant, or I met my fiance in Venice, and so I want that to be a part of the ring. And in real time, the piece will be created and priced out, and you could choose the gemstones as part of that process. So we're super excited about that.
And you can change anything along the process as well. So it is hyper personal.
And so, are we starting to see results already of this? I mean, is this already in execution?
It's still in testing phase right now, but we're excited to launch it pretty soon.
But
by the end of the
to be
year.
able to do this at scale, I mean, what are your concerns? Because it's great as an idea. I mean, everybody would want as customized a solution as possible, especially when we're talking about jewelry, because it's not just about the piece, but it's also the emotion linked to it. But to be able to scale that, what are some of the challenges?
I think making sure that, and that's why we're in testing phase right now, that all the details are there. We don't want to miss anything, and I think that's critical.
So I think for us, a couple of things. So there's a front end, which is easy to do. The back end is the structural integrity of the piece needs to be maintained. It needs to look and feel right. But then the back end is the key. We have 40 different gemstones, all shapes, sizes. And if we don't have it, we can cut and polish it for you in that permutation. So tying all of that together is going to be key to providing that type of experience.
I have a little backstory on that. I'd once sketched something of a design on a paper, and Ankur, very sweetly for my birthday, took that paper and got it made into a jewelry piece. Now, it was just a sketch, right? It was something in my head.
Right.
And it didn't have the structural integrity, so it didn't sit well at all. And that example is really stuck in our head too, that you can dream of something if you scribble something on paper or you're thinking, but to really make sure that it sits well on the customer, we want to make sure that experience is truly complete.
So will you say no, this doesn't work? I mean, if somebody were to send you a design that,
I think that's
will
but
you
yes,
turn it down?
We will actually suggest changes,
a variation,
modification
of that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, to that. But as you look at the opportunities today, and everyone's talking about the need to be phygital, I mean, there is, of course, all of this online retail that's going on. But how do you look at this omni-channel or phygital, proposition that most people are looking at this point in time?
So I think that the question is, why are they looking for offline here where that doesn't matter in the rest of the world? And I think a part of it is trust. They want to make sure you're there. At least in our initial feedback, that's what we've heard. They don't necessarily need to buy the product right there because it is a big purchase. It's not one of those things like we're talking about Zepto. It's not a Coke can. This is a 50,000 rupee piece of jewelry. So they're willing to wait, is our hypothesis so far. But they just need to make sure we're legit. And whatever they're buying, they need to be able to see what it will look like, most likely. And as we progress, we'll see if that hypothesis is correct and we'll modify accordingly. But our strong hunch is that's how it's gonna play out. So we're building flexibility, and so we have Jaipur as a factory, Thailand as a factory, LA as a factory. We're sourcing from all over the world. We're also selling all over the world. We're over-indexing on investing 4 more centers than we need to make sure we never disappoint the customer. Once we lose that trust, that relationship ends.
But how much more complex? It's a complex business to start with, but the complexity of dealing with tariffs, supply chain disruptions, what have the last few weeks meant for you?
It's a challenge, but we don't expect this to slow down anytime soon. The level of complexity will only increase. Uncertainty will only increase. We just have to be ready for it. We're selling all over the world. Our supply chain's all over the world. So in this year alone, we're launching in India. We're also launching in all 6 GCC countries. We're
Okay.
launching in Japan.
Okay.
So we're taking on a lot at once, but the core is the same. And as long as we can maintain that core, Aditi talks about these 3 pillars. So color, customization, and exceptional quality and exceptional value. As long as we can maintain that, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
You know, and it's interesting because you talked about gold prices, and things like gold prices are not in your control, or what happens to diamond prices not in your control, because you know it's a global supply demand, and of course market shifts impacting prices. How do you then ensure that without losing money, that you can actually, you know, deliver to the customer at a price point that continues to be attractive, that continues to be affordable? I mean, how much room is there for you to be able to absorb the kind of price shocks that we are currently seeing?
So I can give a couple of examples of what we did to work around the tariffs to some
Yeah.
extent. So one is, so April 5th, there was a 10% tariff kicking in.
Yeah.
We shipped all of our inventory worldwide to LA before that.
Okay.
Luckily, it can travel by air, so it's easy to do, to beat the time
Right.
for tariffs. We can also cast.
It's really a race against time, wasn't it?
It was. And we didn't have a lot of heads up, as nobody else did either.
Yes.
So, and we can cast in LA as well.
Okay.
So if you make the entire piece in LA, we don't need to worry about tariffs. So that's where the flexibility comes in. We're able to adjust to whatever it takes. And importing gemstones into the country before the tariffs kicked in, that was a 0% import duty or tariff.
But does it not increase costs for you to be able to do all of that in LA versus being
Yeah.
able to do it
Labor
in
costs,
Thailand
yeah.
or India, or, you know?
It does. Yeah, but we have to,
So is
it's
that
a
is that
cost
going to
benefit.
eat into your margins?
It will.
Yeah.
It will. And
Significantly.
crazily enough, we have not passed that increase to customers yet. Because we're anticipating that there's going to be an agreement. We don't know when, but there will be an agreement. So if we revise prices, we may need to revise it back. And that will cause turbulence for the customer. And so we're absorbing it for now, because everything we're importing now, we are paying a duty on. And there was really a double whammy. So gold prices went up 15% in the last month.
Yeah.
Same time the tariffs kicked in.
Yeah.
So everything for us is 25% more expensive than it was in the past. We can absorb it now, and we're going to need to figure it out fairly quickly, as is everybody else in the US.
Yeah. And we just don't know as far as the tariffs are concerned. That's the big. I mean, you know, dealing with uncertainty, and as business owners, how do you cope with that? I mean, there isn't a playbook that teaches you, and you can only control what you can control. So, is there a focus right now on efficiency and squeezing out costs? On you know, what is the focus to be able to cope with this uncertain, volatile environment where you're also dealing with input costs going up so significantly?
So to be honest, it's an advantage for us.
Really?
So we're vertically integrated.
Yeah.
So we capture margin all across the supply chain.
Okay.
Right? So tariffs will affect everyone, but we can absorb it a little bit better. Our profit margins are also the highest in the industry because we're vertically integrated. So we have a little bit of buffer there, and we can actually be aggressive on pricing when no one else can. So we're trying to think of it more as an opportunity than a threat. At the same time, the stuff we can't control, we don't worry about.
And neither can anyone else.
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
We're on a level playing field.
Yeah.
So let's talk about growth, and let's talk about
Yeah.
expansion from here, and what the priorities are going to be. You talked about the India launch, your GCC, Japan coming up as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, your hands are full. It's going to be a busy next few years, I would imagine. What's the investment pipeline looking like for you at this point?
So as CEO, my job now is as a capital allocator. And the capital for us is not inventory, it's people. Our ability to scale and to grow is directly correlated with our ability to find the best in the world at whatever it is. And that's hard. You know, any key role, it takes me probably 6 months to hire that person after 15 interviews. And if we can find the right people, we can grow very quickly. And you know, because we're not public, because we don't have a board, we don't worry about quarterly projections. We know what our 5-year plan is, our 15-year plan is. We don't worry about the short term. It will happen when it's supposed to happen. We're very aggressive, but we want to get it right, because the cost of getting it wrong, we've been through before. We don't want to go through that again.
So what is the 5-year, 15-year plan? Let's start with the 5 years. What is the 5-year plan?
I think we get to $1 billion in revenue
By
and
2030,
by 2030. I think we get to $10 billion by 2040.
by 2040.
Yeah, and at that point, we're only 2% of the jewelry industry. And if you look at category killers for everything else, Google has 70% of search, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Or Microsoft has 70% of enterprise software,
Yeah.
loosely speaking, right? So 2% doesn't feel all that hard from that perspective, but easier said than done. And I think at that time, and even when we get to $1 billion, our profit margins, given our profit margins, will probably be one of the most profitable jewelry retailers in the world. But we'll also be better than anyone else at delivering value to the customer. That's how we're thinking about it. And that being said, putting stuff on Excel is pretty easy to do.
Yes,
Actually
that's the
delivering
easy part.
it.
That's the easy
We
part.
joke about it. He thinks in Excel, I think in PowerPoint.
And then the two converge in
Yeah.
real life. In real life, but is it getting, as part of this 5, 10, 15-year plan? Is a listing, a possibility? Is that something that you would want to consider or are considering at all?
There are all possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, we have no immediate impetus to do it.
Yeah.
We don't want to go.
Only from I think the biggest currency outside of course, fundraising, which at this point in time is not a consideration for you, but the legitimacy and the trust that you spoke of. I mean, suddenly when you see a listed entity, it kind of not guarantees, but it kind of provides you that. Is that a consideration at all?
So what we've been thinking about in the back of our minds is how do we reward our customers in the sense that if there's a way to structure an IPO where customers can buy in first if they choose to, that would be something that's of interest. That's the only reason we exist. They've made us who we are.
Yeah.
And can we share in that ride and upside? And they're customers for life and they should enjoy that. I think that's part one. Part two is along the way, if, as you mentioned with legitimacy, that IPO is certainly one. But coincidentally, in the US for the last 5 years, we're Newsweek's 5-year champion for all of online retail, specifically for jewelry. We've won numerous awards there. Those are also helping with credibility, but certainly in the India market, going IPO can be of interest. But if we need to manage quarterly calls or a board, there has to be a lot of value add to that. I can predict 10 years out. I can predict 15. But there will be volatility in the short term. Are we the right company for that? We've grown at 30% per year for the last 10 years. We got to 10 million in 2017. We got to 100 million in 2022. Looking back at 2017, could we say we're going to add another 90 million when we're just at 10? We couldn't have predicted it. And it was step function growth. It wasn't linear in any event. My fear of going public is we're managing quarterly expectations. We just want to serve the customer. So,
you talked about innovation, and you've also been recognized as 2024's Fast Companies, one of the most innovative companies. In the gems and jewelry business, what does innovation mean outside of design and, using technology to be able to kind of deliver faster, quicker, which is stuff that you're doing. But what does innovation mean in the context of the gems and jewelry business today?
So one is the use of materials. Certainly lab grown is an example of that. But even on like the internal company dynamics, we're trying to structure the company as you would see a traditional private equity fund or a hedge fund structure, which is a very foreign concept for e-commerce within India.
What do you mean?
So the idea is we want to hire the best in the world wherever they are.
Yeah.
But we also want to compensate them like entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Because we're cash flow positive, we can compensate based on goals and based on cash, where everybody else is ESOPs. So low base salary, but you can make 5x, 10x, 15x, depending on performance and value add to the team. And we're doing this in a way that it is seniority agnostic. If you're 21 or 22, like for example, Zepto, but you can create something that's 100x, you'll be compensated for that.
Okay.
And if you're 45 and you're managing the entire team and you don't deliver as much, we'll look at that differently. So the idea is we're looking for outsized value creation. Going back to that number one inhibitor to growth for us is people and getting the right people. So we've even structured the company in a very different way than most would. And it took us a lot of time to be able to actually pull that off because the culture is just very different. Most people are not used to a private equity or law firm or hedge fund culture. But we feel like everybody needs to be an owner in the company. and by heart and by mind, and that's how we survive. The team in India is what made us survive.
Absolutely.
We hired 2 kids out of IIT Delhi that revamped our entire website. They didn't even know how to code. They did that in 2 weeks. We migrated servers back in 2008. People can do amazing things. We just want to try to provide the platform to be able to do that.
So what's the I know you have a rule as far as experimentation within the company is concerned.
Yeah.
So $10,000, if it works, if it works, and if it doesn't, then that's you pull the plug on it.
Yeah.
That's
And that's to be agnostic to who comes up with the idea, whether it's mine, Ankur's, or anyone in the company. And it's basically to keep it fair, and then so you don't get emotionally attached to the idea.
Right.
And that way, if it works with the 10,000, we'll scale it. We'll put more money into it. But if it doesn't,
But
we'll
is
shut
there
it
a
down.
time limit as well? There is clearly a $10,000 limit, but is there a time limit as well?
Absolutely, but depending on the project, it varies a little bit. But it's a short time frame. It's a very tight time frame, though.
And what have you had success stories coming out of this challenge, so to speak?
For customer service, we did. I had this one experience where I went to a Fifth Avenue jeweler, for a milestone event, and I was like, okay, I'm so excited about this purchase, and this is about like 2007 or 8 or so, and they didn't have my size, so they shipped me the piece.
Right.
And it was, I was so disappointed with that experience because I thought there was less care put into it. It was just shipped. So, one of the ideas that we used the $10,000 on was, what do we want the customer unboxing experience to
Right.
look like? And does it truly wow the customer? Does it bring them joy?
Yeah.
And over 30% of our reviews ended up coming on the unboxing
Unboxing.
experience. So clearly we knew that was a winner. So we invested more and more into that category. So that sense of joy that they had when they ordered it, we try to amplify that even more when they unbox it. It has to be equally joyful for them that way. So that was a clear winner, and I certainly have had many that were not winners, but it was a great way to use that rule out.
So, speaking of rules, you have a rule as far as innovation is concerned where you set aside $10,000 for whoever wants to experiment with an idea. But the two of you have a rule, and it's a 30-minute rule. Take me through that.
So Ankur's far better at compartmentalizing than I am.
Really?
Because I guess, as women, particularly I feel for myself that I wear so many hats that I could talk about work now, then I could talk about it 2 hours later, and I could just come and discuss something with him. So we said, you know what, to keep sanity and truly be present for each other, we have 30 minutes a day contiguously that we can only talk about work. And that's kind of helped, maintain our relationship, and I think even improve upon it.
Funnily enough, our favorite professor in grad school knew both of us, and he said, you guys should never work
This is
together.
Harvard, where,
This is
where the
Harvard,
two of you
correct.
went together. Yeah.
And he said we should never work together.
Really? Why do you say that?
So statistically, when couples start something, it doesn't work out for the marriage. And the reason I think is, and I think what he meant was, there's so much stress.
Yeah.
And there's so much uncertainty, and you're managing a family, and you have two people that don't have a steady income stream. And so generally what happens is, even if the company succeeds, the marriage may not.
Yeah.
And we had to set a lot of boundaries to make sure that doesn't happen to us. As a
So
result.
what were some of the boundaries? Because we are now seeing a lot of people who are taking the plunge together, so to speak, in life and in business. So the two of you have been doing this now since 2005, and you've been married since you were 22. So what's the mantra? What are some of the things that you've done differently?
So one of the things we were figuring out early on is who's better at what. My challenge was Aditi's kind of better at everything, so what am I going to do? But what we were able to, Aditi's point on Excel and PowerPoint, that was kind of one. So creative philosophy is her, brand direction's her, running the business is me. And we stay out of each other's lanes as much as we can. If we see each other doing something wrong, she'll scold me for, n number of reasons, and I'll try to fix it as a result. But we try to stay clear of each other's role. I think that's one principal thing. The 30-minute rule is certainly something else. And we try to keep ego out of it. Whether we're wrong or
Easier
right.
said than done.
Yes, correct. But, we mentioned we both failed so many times. We're used to failure. It's nothing new. And it's not even as a couple as much as even within the company. So I'll give you an example. So we made a change in December. So we're now in April. And that change we made on the website resulted in a fall in sales. And it was something that I was saying, we should definitely try. It's something the brand needs to do. We couldn't figure out for 3 months. We tried all sorts of different things. And our head of analytics, Hanish, is, sir, आप ये चीज़ कर लेंगे ठीक हो जाएगा सब कुछ.
Huh.
Right? And we did it. This was 3 weeks ago, and he's right. It works.
Huh.
So I try to keep ego out of it. I was wrong. He's right. That's cool. As long as the company wins, it doesn't matter which one of us is right. So
But how hard is that when you're having the conversation on the dinner table as opposed to in office?
I was just going to say, obviously you want to give each other very honest feedback.
Yeah.
But I think, again, taking the ego out of it and kind of stating the facts, this is what happened. And, rather than you did this, I think
Yeah.
that is key also.
Yeah.
Taking the personal part out of it versus the facts. I think that, and I think now we're getting into that habit. But earlier it was challenging. I didn't always present it correctly, and, I didn't take it correctly often also.
Yeah. But do you feel like did you maybe hold back because you were more worried about how he would react to it as a spouse
Many
as
times.
opposed to as CEO?
Many times, you want to be honest, but then you're like, okay, you want to present it correctly and genuinely, with empathy also. I think that's key in feedback, right? And I think with our kids, we're also the same way. They have a huge entrepreneurial mindset. We're like fail often and fail early, and we have a lot of feedback for them too. And we've kind of now just been conditioned to give feedback in a very non-personal way.
Speaking of kids, both your kids are now looking at entrepreneurship as well. Your daughter's in the skincare business already?
So she's a sophomore in college.
Right.
She's been working on this business for the last 2 years, launching a skincare line, which will launch in a couple of months. One thing we told her, we knew she wanted to be an entrepreneur, is by the time you're a senior, you need to be cash flow positive for the family. That's kind of the goal we gave her. Kind of jokingly, but she took it seriously. And she's building towards that now. And she's already seeing so much in terms of trials and tribulations. She's had a trademark issue come up. She had the duty issue come up. She's sourcing product from South Korea. That's happened. There's a competitor that popped up that has a lot more capital. So she's going through it now. But we're there to support her in any way she needs. But I wouldn't want to compete with her, so she'll be fine. Yeah.
But you talked about her business being cash flow positive already. And that's something that's driven the way that you operate your business as well. Profitability has been a key aspect of wanting to grow this business. And take me through why you believe that was so important to you right at the very start, because in this business specifically, and especially in the D2C business, we've seen companies go through a lot of cash before they actually start to generate some.
Yeah. So I'll go back to business school kind of to answer part of this. So we had one day where Warren Buffett and Bill Gates came to speak to the entire campus.
Yeah.
There's one thing
You've been lucky that way. Ratan Tata, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett.
And we didn't interact personally, but one thing that he said that there's no difference between you and I, and he was saying it to the entire class. I just fly differently. Right? And his point was, do what you love. Don't care about anything else. And that stuck with both of us, saying, you know what, we'll be okay. We'll be able to manage. Even when we were starting the business, I was like, Aditi, is it cool if we do this? She's like, as long as we can afford diapers, let's do it. And that gave so much confidence as a result. But then that's why we'd never raise VC funding. Our goal was going to be a 50-year goal. It's going to take a long time to move the industry from diamonds to color. It's not let's raise a Series A, 5 to 7 years later, let's sell it. It just wouldn't happen. And so we've always thought of it that way, but almost running out of cash. Cash, obviously, for an entrepreneur is like oxygen.
Yeah.
That was like, I never want to go through that again. We're going to grow slow. We're going to grow right. And we'll make mistakes, but the mistakes should not be catastrophic. And let's build it right for the long term. And ironically, just from like a valuation standpoint, if you think about a $100 million company that's grown at 30% per year, that's been profitable for the last 15, the valuation will be okay. But we never thought about that. It was always that let's build something that we're going to be proud of, that can change an industry we were born into. And let's take our time doing it.
Speaking of getting there, going back to what's happening as far as the industry is concerned, and the shifts that we're seeing, the US market and India, and of course you gave us some of the numbers to explain how they're similar in many ways at this point in time. But on the entrepreneurial side, do you believe India is far more entrepreneurial in the gems and in the organized gems and jewelry space today than the US?
Oh, by an order of magnitude at least. 35 lab-grown startups that are funded here. there's like 2 in the US in the last 5 years.
Why do you believe that's the case?
I think the Carrot Lane exit created the entire ecosystem. It validated it. Mithun did the hard work. He built the primary demand for e-commerce. Now, there's people that say, you know what, that was been done before. We could do the same, and we think it's awesome. This is how it should be. This is super exciting. I think it's great. What's happening here? The energy is unreal. This is Silicon Valley on steroids, I feel. So,
But would you consider looking at partnering with people here, or anything interesting that you might want to consider picking up?
maybe we want to
Yeah.
get it right. That's and we don't want to rush that decision per se, but never say never. So Aditi's taught me never to say never. So we'll see.
What else have you taught him, Aditi?
He said, I'm never going into jewelry. I'm never going to live in
Englewood Cliffs, where we
in the
live.
suburbs and little things like
Yeah.
that. But I got my data points along the way.
Yeah, that's a separate Excel sheet altogether.
absolutely.
With
No,
a
I have
PowerPoint
PowerPoint
presentation.
graphs, yeah.
But what have been some of the key lessons for you as entrepreneurs of building this business out, of building it profitably, ensuring that it retains its global flavor as well, dealing with the kind of volatility? What have been some of the big lessons that you would like to share with people who are now looking at getting into, whether it's the gems and jewelry business or business in general? What would you tell them?
So as an entrepreneur, one of the big mistakes we made is we didn't worry about product market fit. The idea is get to product market fit with as little capital expended as possible. That is, I think, number one. Second is, for us, our true north has always been the customer. That's been right. When it was not the case before that pivot, we used to get so many more things wrong. But if you just listen to the customer, they'll tell you what is needed. I think third is follow first principles. So there's a playbook in India now, which is you raise capital and you build as quickly as you can. You project 100 stores, 1,000 stores, whatever. I'm worried that people are not thinking about the right customer experience to the extent they can. Certain people certainly are. But as an industry overall, that's what's going to determine success. And that long-term thinking, I think, is key. Whereas if you're already planning for an exit and you're pre-seed, hey, maybe the priorities...
Yeah, then you build
just-
differently. You build
Correct.
differently. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've made so many mistakes on the way. I would imagine most other startups will as well. Just be ready for that. This is a grueling, grit-based, very hard journey you're going to embark on. Make sure you're clear on what the mission is, and just look at that. It's kind of like Swami Vivekananda. Take one thing, make it your life, dream it, think it, sleep it. If you don't do that, you're going to fail. At least that's what we've been through.
I think also don't wait for the product to be perfect. Perfect it along the way, because there's always room for improvement. And I think pivot and pivot fast. I think those two things we were slower at initially, and really put us on the brink of failure till we learned the hard way.
So today, as you learn to, or you have learned to pivot fast, what's the most important muscle, institutional muscle, that you've had to develop to be able to do that?
I think agility, but in the mind. That accept new ideas. Don't put it down before you've really thought it through.
Don't say
Don't
no.
say no. Don't say no. Don't say no. Absolutely.
So has that been the big learning for you?
Yeah, I think we try to behave like water. We will go wherever the stream is
takes
taking
you.
us. Try not to push back. We're not fixed to any ideas. We've been wrong enough that we know that we're not right all the time. And in my case, I'm probably wrong more than I am right. So it's fine.
What's the mission now that you've set for Angara? What's the mission that you've set for yourselves? Besides the numbers, of course. I mean, the numbers will play out as and when they do play out. But what's the larger mission? What do you hope to accomplish from here on?
If we can get the industry back to its roots, how jewelry was supposed to be bought, rather than when retail stores came, the salesperson is pitching you what they have in the store. It's not what you want. We're trying to get back to that, and we're trying to get back to color. Those are, I think, the two principal things that we're thinking about.
And I think as we grow, I think maintain that soul. The soul of jewelry, of course, but even as entrepreneurs, continue to learn and evolve. The business is doing great, thank God. But yeah, I think growing in this industry, beyond the industry, and passing that on to future entrepreneurs.
So, speaking of soul, how do you nourish the soul, so to speak, outside of work? I mean, for you, it's cars. For you, it's dance and music. And is that the nourish part of the job?
Absolutely, it is. Music and dance brings life into my soul. It breathes life into it. So I definitely need that, and I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that on the side continuously.
But do you still spend enough time in a week or in a day doing that?
Enough is always, there's never enough.
Yeah.
But I think I dedicate enough time to it in my schedule that it truly keeps me going.
And it's on the racetrack for you. That's the decompression strategy?
Yeah, that's being in a race is my meditation. That's right.
Being in a race is your meditation. Explain why being in a race is your meditation.
It's one of the activities where I'm 100% focused. Every micro decision is the difference between success and failure or something catastrophic, right? So I'm only thinking about that. And that is so special. It's not about actually winning the race. It's not about anything else. It's being in
present.
the moment.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So.
And what has being on the racetrack taught you about how you should run your business?
There are two sides of the same coin. Risk reward on the racetrack, you're constantly calculating and you're constantly adjusting. You're thinking 3 turns ahead. If I want to pass that person, I need to plan now. And I'll figure out how to do that. It's being calm in the big stressful moments, because when you're not, your body's tense. And every little movement of the steering wheel can result in something completely different from what you want to do. It's having a car that's not going to have a wheel fall off, or the engine will have something happen to it. So making sure that everything is prim and proper when you're on the track. It's respecting your competition and not doing anything rash that can result in something deadly for them or for yourself. So yeah, it's funny. We've learned so much from racing. So one of the things, for example, is when you go into a corner to maximize speed, you go in slow and you come out fast. And that for us is a $10,000 rule. So let's get it right. And once we get it right, we're 100% on the accelerator. Let's go as quickly as we can, because we have the degree of confidence that the car will not slide. And so it's been a boon from that perspective. I've loved that journey at the same time.
What's the fastest that you've done on the track?
In kilometers, probably 280 kilometers.
280 kilometers?
Yeah.
Wow. And always been a Ferrari guy?
I have. So, one quick backstory is right after we got married, we went to this restaurant in New York, and I saw a red Ferrari parked outside, and I turned to Aditi and I said, one day, we're going to get this one day. And so 2017 is when we hit 10 million. I said, okay, I think we deserve it. Let's celebrate. Or it was more of a celebration for me, to be honest. And since then, I've been obsessed, and I've been reading a lot about Enzo Ferrari. And one thing that he said is, when you buy a Ferrari, you're buying the engine, and I give you the rest of the car for free. So to Aditi's point on soul, the engine is the soul of that car. And for us, gemstones are the hero or the soul of our product. So the reason we cut and polish it ourselves is because we're maximizing for beauty of that stone, whereas most of the industry maximizes for carat weight, because that's how things are sold. So we're fundamentally approaching it differently. So that journey has taught me so much about business at the same time.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with the two of you. We wish you the very best of luck with Angara for your plans in India, but also the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we look forward to hearing much more from you about how the industry transforms itself, as well as your plans on reclaiming what you believe the industry should be, going back to its roots. But thanks very much, and look forward to seeing a lot more of you back here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Young Turks podcast. From all of us here on the team for now, goodbye and many thanks for watching.